Up here in Mustang Lake, had a lot of fluctuation in our tides this past week. It's kind of dicey early in the week. Chillier temperatures, chillier air. Then we rebounded nicely as we got to the weekend. But Mustang was one of the areas that we spent a little time in. Didn't spend a long time in it because there just wasn't a whole lot of water in there. But I've said before, if you fish up in here and you got those northwest winds, northeast winds, you're protected back in here. So we just kind of worked the shoreline, fished over the clump shell, fished the back lake mouths. Couldn't get real far back because there just wasn't enough water there. But we were 20, 30 yards off the shoreline edge and just kind of worked that. And then didn't have a tremendous amount of production. Caught a few fish that was in here, small trout, maybe some undersized redfish in here. But then we just came out, got past a little Texas Parks and Wildlife, little ramp that's right here, and got on this outer edge. And just kind of spent a little bit of time there on that just tad bit deeper water there on the ICW. So I've talked about this in past winters before. But if and this applies just about anywhere up and down the ICW. It doesn't matter if it's specifically up here or further south, down around the Estes Flat areas, or even down past Dunham. Those areas there, you can fish it. Just find you some shallow enough water that if you can wade it, or even that, if you can just stay in your boat and just kind of stay on that edge, try to find that 3 foot of water, and then you're probably going to drop off to 7 or 8 foot of water. And when you got those colder conditions, that's kind of your game plan on what you want to be able to do earlier in the day. So we kind of delayed our trips up here, especially early in the week, trying to get out on the water around 9:30, 10 o'clock, just to allow it, just to see if it would warm up a little bit. It was just, it was a chilly early part of the week, no doubt. Working this edge, working the muddier part of it that goes all the way back to the riprap that's there. And if you fish this, you know what I'm talking about. And you can, like I say, you can fish this thing all the way down. You got plenty of room. You just have to kind of pay attention to where your contour is and where the edge is on that ICW. Just come through there because they will push and pull water that come by there. Sometimes you can be a little bit more tough when they do come by, so just make sure your boat's nice and secure. So again, and we came all the way down to sundown, same type of scenario here. Got in sundown and fished some of this area here, back up on that. Nice muddy, found a little bit of clump here and there, but sundown's one of the bays that you can get into like that, but it doesn't hold a tremendous amount of water when you have those negative tides, which we did have earlier in the week. So you just have to be smart about it. Fished a bunch of variety of different baits. We were in that transition moon. We're fixing to be in the new moon phase here real quick. So you'll be in those 10-day, that window that comes with that new moon phase. So like I say, the transition moons, majority of the bites that we did get, to my recollection, were in and around those time frames, that major or that minor. And we tried to incorporate at least 2 bite frames if we possibly could, if it worked out that we could. But if not, we had one that we really focused on. So plastics, we stayed in with the 4-inch and less. Didn't throw anything very big. Soft Dine XL was probably the biggest bait profile-wise that we threw this past week. Stayed with the original size down south. Burner shads, mirror lure Little John XLs were the main things. Knock and tail lures. Same baits that I throw week in, week out, day in and day out, but just staying with a certain profile this past week to see if we couldn't initiate and get some bites from that and get those fish to eat a little bit. They weren't super active. Water, like I say, water was chilly. It was in the 40 in some of these areas. It rebounded to the 50s, low 50s, but it didn't move a lot. So as the day progressed, our opportunities got a little bit better, especially during that major time frame. Any particular color? Bone Diamond did pretty good for us. Watermelon Red's been very good for us. Twisted Tea's been very good for us. White Ice, depending on your water. We had a lot of wind early in the week, so a lot of this up here was beat up. So your darker color baits did better. Rogue in the knock and tail. Roach flavor did pretty good for us. So just staying with the darker flavors or solid colors did pretty good as well. So that's the kind of game plan that we kind of stuck with and rode with that. But anyhow, looks like we have a better upcoming week weather-wise. It's going to happen. So if you're able to be able to get out on the water in the upcoming days, take full advantage of that. Down here in Spalding, we worked these areas back in here. Like I say, these back lake mouths held some fish for us the past week. Just worked the deeper guts, pretty much all we did. Not very much water in the back lakes, but the guts that led up to all these back lakes, they had some fish that were hanging in there. Weren't super active. There was bait that was not necessarily stacked in there, but comparatively speaking, in other locations, it was quite a bit amount of bait that was in some of these areas back here. So that's your number one key thing whenever you're fishing colder weather, is always locate and find that bait. And again, if you don't, look for your pelicans possibly diving, or maybe an osprey that's looming somewhere around, because they see bait that you don't see. But that was not the case up here. Like I said, we did pretty well in these guts like that, and once the bite kind of kicked in for us, it was pretty easy after that as far as catching fish. Now, any great fish? No, there was a few that were pretty decent fish as far as redfish go, in that lower slot, 21 to 23, and then we caught some lower slot trout at 15, 16, 17-inch trout that were in there, and a lot of undersized fish as well. But that was fun. But that just kind of reaffirms your thinking process on how it goes as far as what these fish are going to do. And it helps too when that water does drop out. It helps concentrate the fish into those gut areas. Plus, it's warmer for them. They can acclimate much better. Again, especially earlier in the week, it was chilly. There were some 30, 35, 36-degree days, so that water temp adjusted accordingly. And some of this water up here was 45, 47 degrees, so that's pretty cold. And those fish are not just super active. So really had to slow everything down. Is where even thought about putting a 32nd ounce jig head on just to let that descent really slow down, to carry that bait down into that deeper edge, or that we were probably fishing about 4 foot of water for the most part, maybe some 5 here and there, but we pretty much stuck with the 16th ounce and just slowed everything down, slow the cadences down, slow your rhythm down, throwing the smaller bait profiles just to see if we couldn't trigger those bites, and that's what worked for us the best. Didn't spend any time in the fingers. It was primarily back all in here on the flat area out here in front. We worked some soft dines and the XLs out there. The Little Johns and Little John XLs did fairly well for us. Again, the two flavors in the Little John that were the best were the watermelon red and the purple demon. And that darker flavor like that, and that's what we triggered a lot of bites off of that. And of course, down south, the Twisted Tea, the Big Papa, did pretty good for us. Watermelon red in theirs in the original size, and then of course we stuck with some darker baits in the burner shad size, see if we couldn't continue those bites once it kind of started to taper off on us. The Knock and Tail Rogue flavor did the best in it for us, and then of course on the soft dine, was just stuck with the light gray black back soft dine, and then the XL's pretty much the same type of thing, but it was more just the smaller version of the soft dine, and that's what triggered most of the bites for us up in here. But just had to pay attention to the wind. We had to duck out of it a few times. It crank up on you, and it had to change the way that you fish some of these areas there. We fished around a couple of shell pads there and just kind of worked our way down the shoreline, just fishing the mouths of these back lakes that are in here. You got all the way down in here to Sherman's. It's another area there. Of course, there wasn't a tremendous amount of water that was back in Sherman's either, so just kind of had to walk our way into that and kind of set yourself up to where you could fish it with that north, northwest, northeast wind to set it up for you. But we did. We were, like I say, able to work it good enough to where we could find some fish and catch some fish out of there on the days that we spent out here. But those are just kind of your tactics and your game plans that you want to go with. Like I say, the upcoming weather is going to be much better than it was this past week. Water temps are going to warm up. We should get some water back in here. I don't foresee another big front that's pushing in. There might be something small, but shouldn't be enough to push any water out of here like this last front did. So pay attention to what your tide reports are, because it's still very important up here. Still got the oyster boats that are out there churning and burning out there in Aransas, the bay system. So that's something to always consider, because it just dirties the water up. So if you can find that clean water, protected water, you'll do yourself a favor. Over here, Port Bay area, that deeper edge that's out there. Like I've talked about this in the summertime, talk about it in the wintertime as well. You've got the right kind of stuff that's there. Now, here's the thing. Fishing up here on a particular day, we just spent one day up in this area, and we wanted to set it up to where that wind wasn't going to beat us up, because it has zero protection coming from a northwest or north or northeast wind. You're going to take a little tail whipping to get to this. If you can put in down there at the 188 sand ramp, you'll do yourself a little bit of a favor. But once you get there to try to fish it, you're just up to your equipment to make sure that you're good. Of course, this shoreline right here is a little bit more difficult when you have those north winds like that, so it makes it tough. But you get around here and you get around on this little flat here around this little grass island area, and all this was pretty much knee deep up in here, somewhat protected. And then you can come on down and get around this point on this west shoreline. You can get up in here and work this edge that's out here, and it sets up pretty good for the most part, depending on how much wind that you have. And you can just spend some time there doing your thing, working the edge on it. And that's pretty much where we stay, because there wasn't a lot of water in the system this early part of the week. We had more water start coming back latter part of the week. But and then of course, the wind was another big factor that in there. So like I say, the first part of this week, first 5 days, man, it was chilly. So you really had to make sure you were layered up well and set yourself up in the right area to fish this. So we primarily worked just plastics on the edges out there, on that deeper edge, to see if we could locate some fish. Same flavors, bone diamond, white ice, watermelon red. Watermelon red's been pretty consistent over the past month and a half. It's done really well. And then, of course, the other, the purple demon, and you can equate that to any bait. It's just a purple flavor, that darker flavor like that. Purple rain, I think, in down south did pretty well. A couple of the other baits we were throwing this way. We're throwing the Pav lures, and then, of course, coastal brew baits outside of our knock and tail and our other, our mainstays that we throw all the time. So that's kind of only other two bait companies I've thrown into the repertoire is the Coastal Brew and the Pav lures. Just incorporate that into the box, and it gives you a nice little array of different looks, profiles, how those baits act, and it's pretty much the same colors across the board. They just call them different things just to keep that copyright thing from infringing on each other. So the main thing there is just give yourself different profiles when you have tougher conditions like this past week. And then and just go to work. Like I say, we try to stick with the smaller profile, fatter things, darker baits, because the water was pretty churned up for the most part. There wasn't a lot of clean water anywhere unless you got pushed maybe all the way back. If you went all the way up into Turtle Pen and got tucked up against that back shoreline that's there, you probably could have found some clean water in it. Or maybe in Italian Bend is another area as well. But like I say, we spent some time here. Just took our time with it, and patience was a key thing here, was with conditions that were tough. So you just had to really kind of bear down, just stick with it, and try to incorporate that major or minor into your fishing day, and then see if you couldn't find and locate you some fish.